Hi, I am Pratim Ranjan Bose, and you are watching my podcast show presented by Iravati Research and Communication Center, or IRCC. Today's topic is Living with Titans. We will discuss how smaller nations in South Asia are recalibrating their policies to accommodate two major powers, an aggressive China and a rising, assertive India. I have with me Professor Sreeradha Datta from Jindal School of International Affairs of OP Jindal Global University. Professor Datta is a well-known author and expert on neighborhood studies. Bangladesh is our most favorite hunting ground. I also have Dr. Nihar Nayak, a research scholar at the Manohar Parrikar Institute of Defence Studies and Analyses, a Ministry of Defence-funded think tank. Dr. Nayak is an expert on Nepal and Bhutan. Welcome, Professor Datta and Dr. Nayak.
Thank you.
Thank you. Welcome. Thank you, sir.
Before we start the session, here are some quick pointers. It is well known that a double-digit growth in China between 1978 and 2008 vis-a-vis democratic India's tentative steps till 2014 had brought many changes in the political dynamics in Indian neighborhood. Most critically, China made huge inroads in India's backyards over the last 2 decades and started putting pressures on India's relations with neighbors. The pressure was most evident since Xi Jinping came to power in Beijing in 2013. Even India's all-weather friend Bhutan was not out of this paradigm. One definite impact of this aggressive power play was India's smaller neighbors like Nepal, Bangladesh, Sri Lanka, or even a tiny Maldives made it a habit to flash China card and take India for a ride. Prime Minister Narendra Modi started taking proactive steps in repositioning brand India to the neighbors since 2014. India's recent elevation as the fastest growing major economy vis-a-vis faltering Chinese economy and the Galwan Valley clash in 2020 brought new focus to Delhi's efforts. Said to be the third largest economy in next 2 years, India is now more confident and assertive in its foreign policy and security response than ever. In episode 56, titled Power Play on Maldives, we discussed how the new India started defining its territory. Professor Datta, over to you. In the last episode, you said that neighbors have started realizing the new realities and are now learning to accommodate both India and China without any definite bias to either of the countries. Can you please explain your ideas with a few examples? Over to you.
So coming back to Maldives, while we know there is a particular government with a particular stance, but again, as we have discussed, that it is very difficult to completely cut the cord with India. They can't disengage completely. They will also. So basically, they want to work with China clearly because China has a lot of support coming in from there. But they also are aware of the fact of the dividends that India brings to the table. And let's look at Sri Lanka. At one point of time, few years ago, we
But
have seen
I disagree with you briefly over here. Is that what Maldives did is completely going out of line, giving, in the defense pact with China and asking India to move out. So that was not really, a neutral play. It was a pro-China play, clearly.
Yeah, so I'm just, but that's what I'm saying, that while the previous government in Maldives, Soli government, that was a completely pro-India play. You remember they had, done away with a couple of Chinese projects. They had run into a balance of payment issue. India had to bail them out. So Soli was so much more pro in that sense because he had issues with China and was kind of marginalizing China's infrastructure effort and all of that. So this government has come and changed that. He came on to that electoral promise. So I'm just saying, I mean, each government will have a kind of a political constituency they want to play up to, and they will use that. But if you look at the larger picture for a decade and more, I am totally convinced that none of the neighbors will be able to do away with engagement with India, which they don't want to. They clearly want to have, India on its side. And I mean, I don't know whether we should use the word benign, but India's positivity comes on a different matter. While Chinese, I think the word you used was aggression, and also we've seen in other credit terms and all of that, every neighbor is aware of the fact that Chinese has a far harder stance. But at the same time, none of them are going to put all their eggs with Indian basket. That's a fact, because they will want to keep their options open for a variety of reasons. I mean, there are many, and I'm just saying that this particular Muizu government is probably doing a pro-China play, but there will be changes. And I'm not sure the entire term is going to be like this, but it's going to be, I mean, I'm just looking at the big picture. India and China will constantly be, leveraged by all the, especially the smaller neighbors.
Okay.
Uh,
I
then
think there
coming
has
back
been
to Sri
some
Lanka.
amendments in Chinese Sri Lankan policy also. I mean, from clearly pro-China to they came back to India post-COVID and post-collapse, and now accommodating both sides. They are not giving it everything to China.
Exactly. And for the first time, we've seen, on the reserve ship vessel and all of that, they got a 1 year moratorium, which we've never seen Sri Lanka had agreed to earlier. So clearly, they're also realizing, I mean, and the bailout, of course, had a huge positive effect, because we were at that point of time really struggling to try to engage. But we've seen now, given the kind of infrastructure, energy projects, a lot of, economic engagement has increased. I would also argue here that, given, and I think you initially in your initial remarks mentioned that given the assertiveness, aggression that China is showing in the region, India is also up the game. I mean, for years we've heard about this neighborhood first and many such, takes on it. But India, for a variety of reasons, has been lethargic with the neighbors. There has been on and off some projects. There's other programs in place, but in the kind of pushing forth its engagement, it was always hesitant. It's really recently that we've seen that, and I think it's happened in the wake of Chinese aggression in the region. And this is true for Bangladesh. This is true for everywhere. Every government is going to, whether you use the word balance, but they are not going to completely de-link from China, nor they can't afford to de-link from India. That's for sure.
What I think we can agree is that there come a bit of hard power element finally in Indian policy making, whether that is evident either in the fast enhancement of defense budget, the response as we saw in the case of Maldives, the quick, it's all, even if we see the budget provisioning for the neighbors, that has been increased substantially over the last couple of years. And this year, particularly, it has gone up a dramatic rise. Over to Dr. Nayak. Nepal is probably the most critical economy in this sub-region after Pakistan, to my understanding.
Okay.
Similar to Pakistan, not a single PM can complete term. Geopolitics is a major influencer in domestic politics, and the economy is in doldrums for more than 20 years. Joblessness is acute, as 50% of the people are below 20 and 70% are below 40 years. Geopolitics had been their bread and butter. In the process, they ended up as victims of geopolitics. Not many big projects announced by either China, US, or India were implemented. Both business and politics are managed by a few people. The same combination of Prachanda, KP Oli, and Sherbadu Deuba lead the show. Prachanda is now in power. He was known as pro-China. How do you think Nepal will adjust to the new reality of a rising power, both economically, politically, and everything, in India? Over to you.
Okay, thank you, Dada, for a very interesting question. And Nepal has a very, if you see the Nepal's current approach, the foreign policy, it is basically trying to balance between three countries, two immediate neighbors and one major power, that's the USA. And why does Nepal do so? I mean, Nepal has been doing this, what Nepal has been doing is nothing new, I can say. If you'll see the Nepal's history of Nepal's foreign policy, it has been doing kind of following similar kind of foreign policy since 1950s. And currently what they are trying to basically do that. Here I can say, if you can say that what in IR, a particular phrase we have been using, say hedging tactics. Hedging tactics means they basically try to get economically benefit from all the major political powers, They don't want to militarily align or have any kind of military kind of alliances with kind of none of these major powers, but at the same time trying to maintain an equal distance between all countries. That has been the current foreign policy of Nepal, whether it is a Nepali Congress-led government, whether it is a KP Sharma-led government or Prachanda-led government. All these Kathmandu leaders has to follow a particular pattern of foreign policy, basically to manage their domestic politics, their economics, and other external pressures. And that has been they have been doing. The perception of Prachanda is a pro-China leader. But I think slightly I'll just to disagree with you that Prachanda is not it's not ideological. Yes, ideologically he is a Maoist leader. He believes in Marxism, Leninism, and Maoism. That we can say that ideologically he is closer to China, because China also follows a similar kind of ideology. But all the practical purposes, if we'll see Prachanda's policy, he is more closer to West, particularly the USA, than China. Rather, I would say the KP Sharma Oli or the CPN UML party is more closer to basically, China rather than any other country. And if you'll see, Prachanda's foreign policy or approach, there are again you have to go to the internal debate and discussion of that political party. There are two groups in the party where Prachanda, as a hardliner leader, he has been trying to balance between India and China, but there are second-rung leaders like Barsaman Pun, Janardhan Sharma, that Narayan Kaji Shrestha, who is currently foreign minister, and Agni Sapkota, who his son has been served and studied in Beijing. So they are basically trying to pushing that Nepal should have a more active policy and kind of should engage more with China rather than having India tilted policy. That is an internal assessment in the Maoist party. I'm telling you, this happened 6 months back. So at this moment, I believe that there is a tremendous pressure on Nepal basically to balance between the US offered program like Millennium Challenge Corporation, which was basically ratified by the parliament in 2021, which offers around 500 million package with a lot of infrastructure programs. At the same time, there is a pressure from the China side that although BRI doesn't have any clear-cut basically draft of what kind of programs, what is the policy, or what kind of activities to be undertaken under BRI, now China is also putting pressure on the current government that the same kind of ratification should be happening to the BRI also. And at the same time, China also putting that since the Nepal has adopted MCC now, and also they believe that Nepal is going to that US bloc by also slightly adopting kind of programs under Indo-Pacific programs. Now China also trying to balance that by pushing that Nepal should accept that global development initiative and global security initiative floated by China last year. So it's a very difficult task for Nepal basically to balance between the two, one major power and one aspiring power, which is China. At the same time, India, which is basically all practical purposes, India is the major stakeholder in the Nepal's foreign policy, whether Nepal's economy, and also India has offered regional programs like BBIN, which is hardly taking off quite smoothly at this moment. So Nepal has to choose between which one is the basically low-hanging fruit for them, whether it's a MCC, whether the BRI or Global Development Initiative or BBIN. So it is a very dilemma for the government, Nepalese government at this moment. But coming to that current government, Prachanda government, if you'll see, they are trying to basically pushing
my question is precisely here. Let us look at the rail project, right?
Yeah.
There was a BRI component of China Rail up to Kathmandu, and India proposed. Now India completed its study 6 months ago. It's a $3 billion project.
Yeah.
China is studying, and they cannot take decisions. Okay. Now there is another factor is, so far we discussed what had been the case with MCC. You must have seen today's tweet by Sanjeev Sannal, where it has come up to the Senate that Biden administration had put millions of dollars in promoting atheism in Nepal. Okay. And India is set to be the third largest economy in next 2 years. With economic power is coming the might and confidence to act. And so Nepal is very critical to our defense portfolio, right? So how this government will manage, whether they will still live in limbo. If they live in limbo, their economy will go further worry. That will create internal problems. But if they have learned to negotiate with and move projects, then there will be, as neighbors, as we are, in terms of from Indian perspective, we want them to move ahead. We don't want them to live in limbo. So how will that happen?
Regarding the Chinese railway, I'll start the Chinese railway first. Why it has been deferred for some time or it has been delayed, you can say that. I think the foreign minister of Nepal has visited to Beijing today. He has left for Beijing today. I think the major agenda, the focus point in the entire visit is basically how to proceed this delayed BRI projects, and in the Himalayan Trans-Himalayan Railway is one of their major discussion point. And I think this time I think they are going to progress substantially, because Chinese government has recently brought out a new policy where they have where they say that there will be some amount of flexibility will be maintained in terms of giving grants and loans under BRI projects. So that was not the case earlier, I can say.
I agree. But the point here is the moment they will do that, first of all, there will be very little economic benefit, because the goods have to go 4,500 kilometers, 5,000 kilometers away to the port. And they have so little to import or export. And second thing is the cost is huge. And third, they will clearly come in confrontation with India. There will not be a railway. India is not going to allow the goods to come to India. Okay. So this is clearly the conflict zone where they are trading into for so long. How will they come out of it and move so that the economy becomes stable?
No, because Chinese are not thinking in that line whether it is a conflict zone, because they believe that this is a kind of straight up, I can say that as a rising power, this is an ego problem for them, because the two countries where they believe that they don't have substantial influence in the Himalayan region, although the entire Himalayan is more than over 50% of the Himalayan region is under Chinese, but still they believe two controls, still they don't have absolute control. That is the one is the Bhutan and second is Nepal. Still they believe that India is in a hugely upper hand in the Nepal matters. So they believe that by having a railway connectivity, so that that will bring out a huge amount of sympathy towards China. And for them, as I said, that they are going to bring substantial flexibility in terms of giving grants and loan to Nepal. Maybe they can say that maybe 50% under grant and 50% loan from the Nepal side to bring this railway. And for them, I think this is basically a strategic victory. Because if you, from the India's point of view, the Himalaya has been considered as one of the formidable defense barrier. They have undertaken several connectivity programs in the Himalayan region, starting from the 1962 as a Arnica highway, and they are also planning to open 7 international trading points to the China-Nepal border. So they just want to have a multiple communication channels, so that Himalayan should be considered as a formidable defense barrier for the Chinese from the India's point of view. And I think it's basically a kind of huge, basically a strategic move from the Chinese side to basically to say that if
let me take you to further pinpoint it quickly. We saw an India-Nepal border dispute in 2021, right? It came right after Galwan. Now, are we going to enter into any such things? India will harden its stance for sure, whatever I get. So where it is heading to, the India-Nepal relations? It is.
India
has something to say.
Since Nihar is sitting here, I thought I just want to add something. Like, this is the Trans-Himalayan project is one. I completely agree that that's a strategic victory from them. They're not interested in the cargo, because there's no cargo that Nepal
There won't be any cargo. There won't be any cargo.
Yeah, so it's not. But I'm also looking at the tourism sector that they are, developing very strongly in Nepal, which has huge potential, and the kind of, scholarships they're giving to Nepali youths, the kind of movement of Nepali youths to Beijing or China and different parts of China had never seen earlier. So this is basically a capacity building exercise which is taking place.
Now, the next question to Sreeradha, sorry, Nihar, we are not cutting you down, just
Okay. No, yeah. I
finishing.
understand.
And you can always ask also some difficult question to Sreeradha. So,
Sure.
Bangladesh, now here is a country which is a very difficult country. The election process is apparently the politics is stable. Elections are doubtful. So that means there are concerns, future concerns. Economy is facing serious structural problems due to prolonged abuse. Policy to build fancy projects at abnormally high cost on borrowed money. Just for reference, the Rupur nuclear plant is something, 13-14 billion dollar. It is, and with serious room for corruption, little checks and balances, all these are backfiring. At a time when every country in the sub-region is having inflation in the range of 5 to 6%, even Nepal is having it at 5%, so is Sri Lanka, which had collapsed. Bangladesh, for last since April 2023, it is near 10% inflation. The foreign exchange is in crisis for roughly 2 years. The government evidently supported China over India since 2017. There are rumors that it has recently sought support from India, including for Tista project in North Bangladesh, that is for project finance. Now, how do you see their foreign policy shaping up? Over to you.
There is a very strong constituency within Bangladesh. We've seen it grow in front of our eyes, who's supporting the pro-China policies, and this is within the government itself. And it's, there is, while, I mean, we know the governments work very well, the leadership proximity is maintained. India is clearly a favored neighbor there. There's no doubt on that. But you also have a take about the fact that 2017 onwards, our projects and our other engagement hasn't really gone the way we had planned. But at the same time, I would say India is kind of happy at the level of engagement that we maintain with Bangladesh. But the other aspect which you said about the economic issues, what we had also seen before the election was there was a lot of flight of money that had gone away because they were not sure what the government situation was likely to be. There are two factors. One is in case of it going down the rabbit hole, which, you, me, we often are wary about the way that things are not being
See,
checked.
the flight of capital has to happen whenever your economy is in doldrums, right?
Yes. So
This is
I
a natural
feel,
reaction.
yes, there are two things, two aspects to this. When we see a dire situation evolving, one, the elite will bring in the money because they are, they are the stakeholders. If the nation collapses economically, they are going to be worst hit. So they're likely to, now that there's a government, there's a, it's a proper parliament functioning, whether we accept, I mean, whether the other constituencies agree or not, it's a functional government, stable to say in that sense. So, and also India will certainly bail Bangladesh out if required to be. So while we don't know what Chinese stance will be, and China, of course, on the Tista project, I know China was making a lot of noises about they had wanting to, and now I've also, I don't know, I've also heard that they've reached out to India, and maybe now India will be able to, because why they were holding back for so long, I'm not aware of that problem. But I think both for India as well as the elite in Bangladesh who virtually run that economy there, will not allow the country to collapse economically. Something similar, a way that Sri Lanka had almost, I mean, had collapsed and it had to be kind of bailed out. I would think something like this is likely to not happen because the other stakeholders would likely to, try and address those measures. But at the same time, both in terms of, and rightly so, in terms of the Nupur, in terms of not only Nupur, even the Tista railway project, sorry, the Podda railway project, which is being done by China, they have huge amount of money being
I
fueled
mean,
in
let
this
us
border.
not, let us, I mean, it is a very serious issue. I mean, pick any project. It's not happening up in the Himalayas, right? Any project, the metro rail, right? The cost of the metro rail is, if you take standard Indian cost, is 300 crore a kilometer on viaduct. Okay, that means above ground. In Bangladesh, it is, the last I heard was 1300. So that I heard some 2-3 years ago. I don't know what has been the final cost. So these are abnormal costs we are talking about. And ultimately, you know that the repayment pressure has started coming in. So finally, economics is not a one-way game. You cannot just get away with it. And as you said, the flight of capital, one structural reason is when your foreign exchange value is in question. It will always happen. People will not bring remittances in, right? You have artificially put some value on your foreign exchange ratio, but actually it is far more, it should be devalued. So one critical thing we find in the neighborhood is that we have a very mixed bag. Bangladesh, just as you were mentioning about that reaches, the oligarchs of Bangladesh will not allow it to fall. But at the same time, it is in the hands of only few people, the whole economic and politics. Similarly, in Nepal, it's a case of, in Bangladesh, at least there is political stability, so to speak. In Nepal, there is no political stability and the whole thing is controlled by a few. Now we are up to Bhutan, where there is political stability, which has been the only all-weather friend of India. And there has been, the Prime Minister Modi is just back from the visit. The provision for Nepal in this 5-year plan has been doubled to roughly $1.2 billion. I think in this year's, sorry?
To Bhutan.
To Bhutan. From 500 crores to, from 5,000 crores to 10,000 crores. So that's roughly $1.2 billion. This year's budget, we provided over 2,000 crore to Bhutan. We upped the budget for doubled budget for almost every neighbor, right? So, but Bhutan is the largest recipient of India, we all know. Now, having said that, there were some issues between India and Bhutan. Some issues started developing, especially I think it's since Doklam, right? In 2017, it came to the fore, and if I'm not wrong, there were some issues with military roads and etc. So Nihar can tell it better that what is happening there. This is a completely another country. How do you think it's evolving with this scenario? For Bhutan, it's a case where they are completely aligned with India. So they have to give some space to China, but not, of course, without diluting Indian interests. What is your take?
Okay, thank you, sir, for this question. Very interesting. Look, the Bhutan, I think one of in the entire neighborhood, I think the most smartest country in South Asia, I can say that. It is a tiny country, but I think the most effectively they have negotiated against India. And it's the only country which have been hugely benefited from India's economic growth. And also taken note what is India's sensitivity and concerns in the Himalayan region. So they have very successfully, so far managed, basically dealing with that.
Most successful economy that way. For a small country, very successful economy.
Yeah, a successful economy. And you will see India-Bhutan relationship, one of the most, I can say, the most successful bilateral relationship in terms of hydropower generation, and in terms of the trade and transit, interconnections of political equation, you can say the understanding between the leaders of the both the sides. I come into that, current domestic developments in Bhutan, I think like Maldives, perhaps I can say 3 to 4 months back, we almost some extent, feeling that we are losing control over Bhutan. Why? Because there was a DNT government which has been sitting in Thimphu for last 5 years. And that government mandate was, if you see the manifesto of that government that's headed by Dr. Lote Sering, the mandate was basically two things: that improve the economy, bring out the economic reforms in Bhutan. Second, to improve the health sector, in the particular rural health sector. And third one, most critical one, and from the India's point of view, that they wanted to resolve boundary disputes with China. That was the mandate and mentioned in the manifesto. But interestingly, as if you see the last 2023, the Prime Minister also moved quite quickly, also tried to resolve the boundary disputes with China. And that's why quickly the King of Bhutan, he visited in the month of April last year and the November last year also, to basically India was a bit worried about that, the way the Bhutan was getting pressure from China to resolve this boundary dispute. Luckily, the government currently in Thimphu is very pro-India. This Togbe, Prime Minister Togbe, is pro-India because the PDP has been there earlier in 2013 to 2018. So he has a very limited mandate, very focused mandate, and India-focused foreign policy he has been adopting, and that's why he undertook India visit first, although the previous Prime Minister visited. But again, that's why the Prime Minister Modi reciprocated the visit and accepted the invitation immediately. Within 6 months, 6 days time, he visited. And if you'll see, currently, I don't think the China-Bhutan border negotiation will happen anytime soon, and the Bhutan cannot move unilaterally without basically taking India into confidence or consulting India first, while basically giving any kind of assurance to China resolving border dispute. At least next 5 years, I can say that India is safe in the Himalayan region.
I think for easy understanding of the listeners, you can explain that what does this resolving border dispute means. It means that China has been asking for land strategic to their use. Probably that is where it stands.
Yeah, because they have been basically pushing on Bhutan. Basically, see why China has created this is basically a disputed, has been imposed on Bhutan. Originally,
Same with our Arunachal Pradesh. Same with our Arunachal Pradesh.
This is a dispute has been imposed on Bhutan, basically to put Bhutan under pressure that it should allow China to have its mission in Thimphu. That's the only single point agenda of China. And Bhutan has been so far trying to basically not to succumb Chinese pressure. And I think currently, I think the process, this Chinese actually expectation and this pressure tactics will not work for some time, because I see the Prime Minister, why did Prime Minister immediately visited basically to showing basically messaging to the China that we are firmly backing and supporting this government. So it's basically messaging visit, I can say, that Prime Minister Modi's visit.